from getting his tax returns, and as is his legal right, and of course Trump is appealing, prolonging efforts since 2019 by the House Ways and Means Committee to obtain 6 years of Trump's personal and business tax returns, doing so to conduct oversight of the IRS's mandatory presidential audit program. Trump is the first president since Nixon to refuse to release his returns. His reasoning, the very same from day one, claiming he's, quote, under an audit. With us now is someone who knows the man very well, Trump's very own niece, Mary Trump. She's the author of Too Much and Never Enough, How My Family Created the World's Most Dangerous Man. Mary is also the host of the new podcast, The Mary Trump Show. Mary, it has been a years-long battle over Trump's tax returns. And what do you make of this recent decision that came from the appeals court?
I think it's the right decision. I unfortunately think that it's too late, or it's taken way too much time. Obviously, again, as you mentioned, he's going to appeal. And this seems to be the problem. You know, American democracy is on the brink, essentially, because over the course of 5 decades, this one repellent person has been able to get away with his many alleged financial crimes, his crimes against women, and now his crimes against our country, because he's either run out the clock or he's been able to outspend his opponents. And it puts us in an extraordinarily precarious position.
So it would suggest, Mary, then, what is Donald Trump going to be afraid of to come out in those tax returns, right? Isn't that what people do when they're scared of something coming out and seeing the light?
Yeah, and it's what he does all the time, right? It's his modus operandi. He never wants the truth about his finances or his business dealings to come out. What's kind of troubling, though, is that it's not as if we don't know. It's not as if we don't have information. In fact, on October 2nd, 2018, the New York Times came out with an extraordinary expose about Donald and the Trump family's dealings, financial dealings, and their alleged tax fraud, et cetera. So this isn't new territory. It's not as if the tax returns are going to uncover anything that hasn't already seen the light of day. And yet it's still vitally important, of course, that Congress has the opportunity to go through them even more carefully. But again, it's not as if anything in those documents will be surprising. They will only reinforce things we already know.
So last week, a House committee issued a report finding the agency overseeing Trump's D.C. hotel lease failed to examine ethical and constitutional conflicts and never checked if Trump was complying with the Constitution's emoluments clauses, which prohibits a president from taking payments or benefits from foreign and domestic governments. Noah Bookbinder, the president of Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, lays out why this matters, writing, quote, "The hotel was the epicenter of Trump's graft. Anyone looking to curry favor with his administration could simply walk over to his namesake hotel a couple of blocks from the White House and flash cash." Mary, do you think the aftermath of Trump's presidency, the abuses of power, the multiple investigations, do you think those make a good enough case to reform how oversight is being conducted of any U.S. president, Democratic or Republican?
There's no doubt about it. I mean, the emoluments clause exists for a reason, right? The Hatch Act exists for a reason, and yet time and time again, we see these things being violated and there being no consequences. So just in the context of what we're talking about right now, think about how many times there have been opportunities to stop or at least derail Donald because he is so blatantly broken a law or violated something like the emoluments clause. Think about how many people have been complicit in enabling him over the years. So if our system cannot respond swiftly to the threats that this very vengeful person and all of his enablers pose, then I think our system might be irreparably broken. So we might want to focus on doing something about that in the short term while we still have a chance.
So, Mary, before I have to let you go, do you think there's any utility, knowing your uncle, knowing the litigation maneuvers that he does, do you think there's any utility in the January 6th committee trying to subpoena him to come and answer questions about what happened on the day of the insurrection?
Absolutely. He's a private American citizen. He needs to answer to his alleged crimes. He needs to explain his participation in the incredibly serious events. There was an armed insurrection on January 6th in this country, and we need to know what role he played. He needs to be held accountable if that is indeed if they indeed find that he was complicit in any way. And we also need to know what his response will be. Is he going to plead the fifth? Is he going to show up, and is he not going to show up and be held in contempt? Last I checked, Donald believes that people who plead the fifth are guilty. It would be very, very good to know how he responds and what that response says about what kind of trouble he thinks he's in.
Well, if he took the fifth, he'd be joining in a group of some other